Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Tamron 45mm f1.8 VC USD lens. Now, I actually did my typical review of that lens last year, but I ended up making the decision to purchase one, and so this is more of a look at it as a long-term travel option and general purpose lens. When I first heard the announcement about the 45 VC lens, I wasn't very excited because I thought it's kind of a lame duck focal length. But having used it now over the last year or so, I can attest to the fact that it's actually an incredibly useful focal length. You know, we often think of a 50mm lens as being a normal angle of view lens, and that's probably part of why I was disappointed. The reality is, however, is that the actual normal framing of view is actually somewhere between 43 and 45 millimeters, kind of approximating what the human eye sees. And so in reality, this is actually closer to a true normal lens than what a typical 50mm lens is. And because of that, I found it to be somewhat of a, the Goldilocks focal length, just right for a lot of things. And it's actually made it into my rotation as a travel lens, and I just want to detail some of the reasons why I think that it works so well and why it's attracted to me for that. Number one, as I detailed in the full review, and if you haven't seen that, you can take a look at that here. These lenses, this new line from Tamron, the SP Prime lenses, they really have a great build quality to them, including some more robust weather sealing than what you typically see. As a result, over the last year, I've shot this lens in a lot of, diverse weather conditions. Very humid conditions. I've shot when it's raining. I've shot, and of course I live in Canada, and so I've shot in extremely cold conditions, and shot this lens on days where the temperature is at 30 degrees below freezing. And so I've shot it in snow and all of those, winter type conditions as well. Never had any kind of hesitation or issue from it. And so I like that aspect of it. I also really like the close focus ability of this lens. One of the things, if you're going to just kind of carry out a fixed focal length, you're looking for as much versatility as possible. I actually like walking around for street photography or just kind of, general purpose shooting with a prime lens, because often with prime lenses you have a bigger aperture that allows you to have more control over depth of field and storytelling, which is a big part of what I'm doing in that kind of situation. When I'm traveling, when I'm shooting events, I'm trying to tell a story. And so I find having a larger aperture prime useful for that. And I've shot this lens a lot right at f1.8. It's very sharp at f1.8, and also in most situations it has really nice drawing and kind of bokeh rendering. The one exception to that rule is if there is bright highlights in your scene, like Christmas lights, it does exhibit some unfortunate onion bokeh or concentric rings within the bokeh highlights that I'm not crazy about. And sometimes I will water that down in post a little bit to eliminate that look. That's the one criticism I have about the bokeh. But in most situations, the bokeh rendering is actually really lovely from the lens. And so I like that aspect of it. But I was talking about the close focus aspect. Really, if you're going to go out and you're going to tell stories, having that ability to focus down closely to, not quite macro level, but let's just say pseudo macro territory. In this case, almost a 0.30 times magnification, 0.29, which is almost double what the average is for a 50mm lens. That's incredibly useful because it allows me, for example, I'm walking along the pedestrian village in Mont Tremblant. I was able to, shoot flowers and or sit at the table and kind of shoot creative shots of things at the table, maybe a water bottle or a bottle of some kind of vinegar, and just kind of tell stories. And of course a prime lens is great when you're in low light settings because it has a larger aperture, and in this case you have the combination of both a larger aperture along with having the image stabilization. That's a kind of a double plus in this situation because It means that you can shoot at low shutter speeds and to keep your ISO down a bit more. And get really fantastic results. And so I have found this to be a really great lens for shooting in restaurant environments or dimmer environments to where I can get really clean looking results that have nice bokeh and really kind of helps to render some of the atmosphere of those kind of situations. So I've enjoyed it a lot for that. As well. And so I find that those aspects of versatility, and then of course 45 millimeters is still a pretty nice focal length for shooting both general scenes, but then also shooting landscape situations. And this lens is very sharp from edge to edge. The resolution is very consistent across the frame. And so as a byproduct of that, it's a really nice lens for shooting landscapes, and then also because it has low distortion, it's also a nice lens for stitching together panoramas, and if it, if the scene you want to shoot a little bit wider than what the focal length allows, shoot a couple of frames. I like to shoot less frames if I'm shooting horizontal frames, but I really like to shoot more frames with a vertical or a portrait orientation and stitch those together to get a more natural looking final crop ratio at the end. And so I find it to be very versatile for that and extremely sharp, and so I'm really happy with the results. When I did the review of the 5DSR and its 50.6 megapixels, I found that the 45 VC was a great match for that lens because it resolves very highly and it does a great job. Now, not everything is perfectly rosy for it. While it is a very accurately focusing lens for me, autofocus speed could be a little bit faster. And so if you're in, very fast moving scenes, you may be disappointed sometimes that you miss some shots because the autofocus isn't quite quick enough. And that will happen periodically for me. Most of the time, the focus speed is enough. And the fact that it's highly accurate, of course, is very helpful. And I use this quite often in my portrait lens rotation for that very reason. The other thing that I'm not delighted about is the fact that it does have some green fringing. And so I'm kind of surprised by that, considering that that's not typically a weakness for Tamron lenses. But in this case it is, but at the same time it's really not, it's not terrible. And so while I'm not crazy about the fact that it's there, and I find that it shows up more when I use the lens in video production, because then it's very easy to fix chromatic aberrations, fringing when you're shooting stills, and it's a little bit more difficult, at least for me. I'm not an amazing video guy, and so it's a little bit harder for me when shooting video. But I do like using the lens because I like the overall focal length and the ability to focus down closely. It allows me to get some kind of creative shots that you couldn't with a lens that isn't able to focus down so closely. And so when it comes to overall shooting, one other advantage that I should detail for travel shooting is that this lens has really great flare resistance. And so I like to point it into the sun, and here I shot it. I was traveling in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and I saw a scene where somebody had the tripod set up and they were shooting shots as the sun was rising up over the Atlantic Ocean. And so I threw them into the frame and I shot pictures of them, and you can see some of those results here. And you just don't have to worry about any kind of real flare or ghosting taking place at all. And so it's really great in that regard as well. So overall, I found that the 45 millimeter focal length actually is a really great and natural focal length for shooting, just kind of shooting family events. My youngest turned 9 years old yesterday. And so the lens that I grabbed for shooting his birthday celebration, it was this one. I find that I reach for it a lot of times in events within the church where I'm just kind of shooting casually and I don't want to carry something big and heavy. And I find that it's a good storytelling lens for that kind of setting. And if you don't mind moving around and doing a little bit of zooming with your feet, you can really get a lot of great results from it in that regard. So overall, it's proven to be a far more effective, efficient lens than what I would imagined. And at the moment, other than I have the cheapo 50mm STM lens from Canon, the f1.8 STM that I'm actually using to video with right now, but I really use that lens primarily for video. It's the only autofocusing 50mm lens that I have, and I have a number of other manual focus 50mm lenses, but really the 50mm lens that I've chosen to go with for now is this Tamron 45 VC, and I have found it to be an excellent lens over the long run, and one that I find that I go to very often. So if you're considering a kind of a general purpose travel lens, you may not be thinking of a lens like this as an option for that, but I found it to be a very effective lens for that. It also travels well. It's, you know, it's not tiny, but it is it's reasonably compact. It fits easily into a bag, and so it's an easy lens to bring along as well. And I've just found that when I'm going through my extensive kit of lenses, I own over 20 lenses, 5 different bodies, that, you know, when I'm making the kind of final selection for what I'm going to carry in a limited kit, that this lens keeps making the cut. And so that's certainly something that recommends it. I'm Dustin Abbott. If you haven't already, please subscribe. You can follow me on social media down below. Thanks for watching today.